What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was not loved? So he made the world worship him. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Kakashi, to collect more data regarding humans, would it be abortive if I were to attend a school? Kakashi Hitaki, a brilliant man of science, had composed the perfect robot. His discovery would have made him a legend in scientific history. However, Kakashi disagreed with the idea of exposing the world of his miracle creation. He wasn't a fool to believe the world would use his creation for good. It seemed others' opinion for good was setting war for selfish and foolish reasons. Money, land, drugs, freedom. Far too messy and unwanted for Kakashi. He wasn't the sort to boast over his prodigious achievement. He somehow couldn't help bragging about his porn, which often earned him a nice, sharp smack from Iruka. The real purpose of creating a computerized human was not for anything complicated like solving world hunger, or wars, or taking over the world. Even though he's capable to do all three at the same time, he simply wanted a child. A child to call his own, a child to watch them grow. A child starts off as a blank slate, not knowing the truth and reality of the world. Innocent and clueless. They don't experience emotions until they understand what they are. A robot is very much the same, though it takes them longer to learn emotions. Most people would argue that it was absurd to believe a machine could learn emotion, to be capable to feel. But Kakashi labeled them as lazy for such biased beliefs, even though he himself was contradictory. Kakashi had been married to a kind, gentle man with chestnut hair and eyes. His skin was a warm, brown color, and he had a horizontal scar across the bridge of his nose. His name was Iruka Amino, his husband that would forever hold his heart. Kakashi and Iruka both desired a child just like any other pair of parents, but in their country, gay marriage were allowed. But adoption was not a possible privilege for gay couples. Currently there were protest groups causing riots to disturb the peace for their rights, but Iruka and Kakashi didn't want to get involved in such messy chaos. They simply wanted a child and a peaceful life. Disturbances was a thing of the past that they were not eager to jump back into. So Kakashi set out his planning. As much as he was an intelligent man, it took 3 difficult years to finish all of his child. Kakashi longed to make their child as human as possible. It was puzzling to find the correct materials to develop hair. He didn't want to use plastic hair known as synthetic plastic. Wigs were usually made of that. So Kakashi tried experimenting real hair and guitar strings. He managed to make the hair remain thin, soft and shiny, but strong as metal wires so that the hair wouldn't fall out or stretch. Of course the hair was originally a light brown, but the chemicals led it to change to a pure golden color. Iruka insisted that the color was lovely and wanted to keep it, him never being too hard to please. For eyes, Kakashi stuck with glass. He combined laser eye technology and camera recording technology. With the spherical point of view, it would remain similar to that of a human. The eye color was decided to be an evening blue that was highlighted with azure blue, a mix of blazing sapphire and icy topaz. For skin, it was relatively easy since all Kakashi had to do was use stem cells taken from the umbilical cord to grow as a sheet of skin. Naturally the skin shade came out golden thanks to Iruka's healthy tan. Kakashi and Iruka used their own stem cells because then their child would have something gained from their parents. It would truly be their child. Skin took time to form and grow in their basement. It took about 1.5 years to develop enough skin for the whole body, and some more for insulation against water. The voice was also an easy process. Thanks to Japan's voice synchronizers, Kakashi had managed to personalize the voice of their child. Iruka insisted he wanted the voice to be cheerful and bright. So Kakashi managed to create a voice that could be warm, gentle, and loving. It could have been excitable, happy and loud, and it could change into a low, husky, alluring voice. Kakashi wanted their child to be colorful and unpredictable, to act like he was full of life, to be able to express his joy of human company once he found what it meant to be a human. The human body was the final process. He combined everything he knew into the empty shell of a body. His bones were metal, and his memory was separated into 2 parts. 10% temporary memory where Kakashi would check and decided whether to erase it or store it in the permanent memory. 90% what he used to store useful information. When everything was completed in 3 years, Kakashi and Iruka had decided to name their son Naruto Uzumaki. It was the name Kakashi's mentor would have named his son if his wife and him hadn't died. As a last-minute idea, Kakashi programmed a learning system in Naruto so that he could learn emotions. Kakashi was a man of science and shouldn't believe that a human android could feel things. But Kakashi believed it was possible for Naruto to learn emotions. To feel, and truly, live. To be alive. They of course programmed Naruto to have basic information down, such as understanding math, science, and human behaviors. A small addition of a morality compass couldn't hurt, just to give Naruto a way to understand that if an old man in a bunny suit wanted to give their child a drive, Naruto would know to say no and run away. Naruto would be able to function as long as he absorbed the sun's rays or plugged himself into an energy socket by an extendable wire behind his earlobe. It would take 9 hours to maintain normal functions for every 3 days until his next charging session. Naruto was finally complete. His day of completion and awakening was on October 10th. Today marked Naruto's 4th birthday since he was created. For his birthday present, Naruto asked to attend a school. A public school. With humans. Pardon, Naruto? Why do you want to go school again? Kakashi inquired. Not sure if he misheard Naruto's sentence, he snapped his book of Icha Icha Paradise Volume 3 closed. The young android normally never asked for much. The only time he asked for anything was to recharge when his battery was low or to have a maintenance check. This was an unexpected question, a good sign of growth in him, but Kakashi wanted to check just in case, not wanting to jump the gun, raise hands in joy, and fuck Iruka. Well, scratch that, he'd do the latter either way. Iruka was just irresistible. With a second that had passed, Naruto was becoming curious about humans? This was a very good sign. The blonde boy nodded. I noticed based on my observations that human teenagers experience the most emotions. You created me to learn to be human. Humans learn in school. They create bonds, so it would make sense if I were to attend to school. Kakashi let out a disappointed sigh at the answer, but all hope was not lost. Alright, but why the sudden realization? He asked, as he began to comb his hair. Kakashi knew a friend who was a principal of a high school. Her name was Tsunade Sanin. Naruto was also confused as to why. Perhaps it was because the amount of teenagers holding hands, kissing each other, laughing together, and fighting together. Naruto had seen Kakashi and Iruka do that all the time. He didn't understand why there was so much touching and kissing when it came to couples. They had intense emotions for each other, that much Naruto knew, but why? They knew they loved each other, so wasn't that it enough? No questions left to ask how one felt about the other. Love, what was it anyway? Naruto looked into his dictionary. -1. Feel a deep romantic or UAL attachment to someone. Do you love me? Synonyms. Care very much for, feel deep affection for, hold very dear, adore, think the world of, be devoted to, dote on, idolize, worship, more. Antonyms. Hate. It still didn't make sense. If love was romantic and UAL, how would one see the difference between infatuation and love? Naruto knew he wasn't human, but he would have felt curious if he was. He didn't feel curious, he just wanted to know as much as he could, just like how he was programmed. I would like to know the difference. He plainly stated, blinking plainly at Kakashi as if it was that obvious. And what difference are you looking for? He asked quietly, taking note of this new side of Naruto. I look at my hands. Naruto's arms stretched to just be in front of him, not tearing his eyes off the back of his tanned hand. Then I look at Kakashi's, Iruka's, and strangers' hands. They're all different. Naruto looked to Kakashi. Humans are different, every one of them. One might have different skin, hair, eyes, body shapes. Even twins are different when it comes to their personality. There are always differences in everyone. But what is the same, are that humans can feel emotions. Naruto explained with a dull expression, staring blankly at Kakashi. Naruto turned head to the window, gazing at the children walking home from school. Humans grow to be different. They are meant to be different. And I am different, he explained. Naruto's expressionless glazed eyes were now staring at Kakashi. Naruto's eyes were empty and cold as usual, but something was new in his eyes. Kakashi stayed silent, wanting Naruto to continue on with his persuasive speech. He was already going to say yes, but he just wanted to hear more. Am I really any different from a human? That is why it is important to attend to school, to socialize with humans. I'd like to know how to feel joy and pain, so I can share it and support myself and others. He explained. Kakashi gave a half smile. This was a start. Naruto may be turning human after all. No, you are not, you're human, Naruto. You're my son. Kakashi agreed with Naruto with a happy smile, sitting up to place a hand on Naruto's head. I'm feeling old, you're growing up so fast. Kakashi was awake at 6 in the morning, which was surprising considering how much of a lazy bum he was on the first day off school for Naruto. He helped Naruto comb his hair back, but due to the metal content in Naruto's hair, it refused to mold into the direction Kakashi wanted. His locks of hair continued to stubbornly point in every direction. With a disheartened sigh, he moved to other things, like dressing him properly. He gave a change of clothes for Naruto to change into. As soon as Naruto finished changing, Kakashi immediately drove to them Konoha High. It was where Kakashi had met Iruka, where he met his lifetime friends, so he had faith that Naruto would learn how to feel. He just needed to fix one problem. Kakashi was sitting in the office of Tsunade Sanin. He was normally a tranquil and laid-back man, but he was anxious in the presence of her, especially when she was glaring at him. She had an intense air around her. It was very clear with a "I will crush you if you step out of line" message. But she wasn't too scary. She was a soft-hearted woman from Kakashi remembered as a teenager. Sipping her coffee, she glanced indifferent eyes at Naruto. He looked human, but... So this is Naruto Uzumaki? She looked at the papers regarding Naruto and his information. Son, said she, raising her eyebrow as she stared at Kakashi in disbelief. Kakashi nodded. Normally he was carefree, but he knew Tsunade was a woman to respect. Silently he wished Iruka was here with him instead of Iruka traveling to England to teach. He was the only one who could ever simmer down Tsunade's fierce temper. But Kakashi made a mental note to email Iruka of this new development in Naruto. Naruto politely greeted the principal, but never said a word to her, which was odd. Naruto usually said a brief hello when introduced with strangers. With a sudden bang, her hand slammed in the table, her eyes scaring Kakashi. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow at Tsunade's expression. He's an android, not a human. Teenagers are reckless enough and a pain to deal with, but adding a robot too? He could be a potential threat to the students. How do we even know if he won't malfunction and begin slaughtering my students? She shouted. Tsunade didn't want to believe in her words since she knew Kakashi was not a reckless man. But as a principal she needed to put she feelings away and treat this as if she never knew Kakashi. Her students were her responsibility, and under no circumstances would she ever put something else in front of that. She needed a drink badly. Naruto is the newest model of androids. He is programmed to be unable to harm humans in any way. If there is any sign of malfunction in his system that might threaten the safety of other students, there is an automatic security shutdown that will turn off all functions and give me time to locate him through GPS. Kakashi reasoned, hoping Tsunade would take the bait. Naruto decided it was not his place to speak considering he was the object they were discussing about. It would do no good if he spoke up. However, he noticed a fly that was in the room. Automatically deciding to get rid of a bacteria-infested insect that might have carried lice, Naruto took off his shoe and watched the insect fly around for a few moments before he was able to predict which area the fly would decide to land on. Its body settled itself on the edge of Tsunade's hot coffee. His arms stretched behind him as he threw with all his strength to hit the fly. He killed it, there was no doubt. His throw went 25 miles per hour and the fly definitely died. But there was the unexpected incident when his shoe had bounced and had hit a student in the eye, and put a hole in the wall. Naruto, you have any idea how difficult it was to get Tsunade to finally agree? Kakashi scolded Naruto, whimpering with the loss of his money in his wallet to pay off the damages, and buy sake to calm her raging temper. Thank the higher powers that Kakashi knew Tsunade was low on alcohol. I am sorry, Kakashi. Naruto apologized with an even tone and with a dulled expression to match it. Kakashi narrows his eyes at that. He wished Naruto would smile, to truly smile like he felt emotions. Not yet, but Kakashi knew one day Naruto would smile. And when he did, Kakashi knew it would be the most beautiful sight. Don't apologize if you don't mean it. It takes away the meaning of it. But do not break anything. You got that? And remember your strength. Kakashi warned. He was still comprehending that. Naruto nodded obediently. If he was to refrain from using his strength, he would do so. Kakashi, would it not be easier to turn off my strength or at least minimize my strength range? Well yes, but I don't want to do that, Naruto. Naruto blinked. His program was unable to understand Kakashi's response as to why he would not do such an obvious thing. He began to browse the internet as to why Kakashi refused. Nothing. Asking questions was a last resort Naruto would use. He chose not to trouble Kakashi and Iruka with his troublesome questions. Although Iruka and Kakashi insisted any question Naruto had for them would never be considered troublesome. But if that were true, why did Kakashi and Iruka stumble over their words and answer in broken sentences when I asked certain questions? It seemed they were all of a sudden nervous or scared with their heartbeat picking up speed. A good example was that there were loud moaning, begging, thumping, and yelling from Iruka and Kakashi's bedroom at night. They had both flushed a bit red, Iruka considerably darker than Kakashi. They gave vague responses and Naruto could only label the data of that moment as unanswered, unknown answer. Why do you not want to? Are you tired? I am able to assist you by adjusting my strength for you if that would please you. I am sorry that I am troublesome. Naruto apologized, though he did not see the problem of his strength since he was specifically designed not to harm or destroy anything in any way. But if Kakashi had trouble because of his strength, then it would only be appropriate to apologize for whatever issue he had caused. No, you're not troublesome. Don't apologize, Naruto. Kakashi insisted with a heavy heart. Naruto was still learning. Kakashi was a knowledgeable man of science, but he knew nothing of teaching a robot to feel and think like a human, but he had faith. He believed Naruto would one day understand humans and emotions. I opened my eyes slowly to allow my system to focus my eyesight to adjust itself. I sat there to connect to my internal functions safely. I repaired my voice box as I have found it was sounding staticky contrary to its initial smooth settings. I needed to maintain a smooth voice or else I would have been out of place among humans. When I had finished charging my battery for the next 3 days, I briefly checked the calendar and realized that today would be my first day attending a school with humans. Concluding that it would be best to sit on the sidelines to observe humans grow since adolescents experience the most growth, I sat there and proceeded to get up from my bed, though I questioned why I had a bed since I didn't require such a thing to properly function, to dress myself. I headed to my closet where Iruka had demanded on purchasing bright-colored attire for me. Although I have no opinion on clothes, neutral colors such as brown and gray would have suited fine instead of orange, yellow, blue, red, and green. These were rather flamboyant, plain colors wouldn't attract such useless attention. But Iruka had insisted it was important to look formidable and approachable to my peers during the first week I was born. Although I do not comprehend how color choices affect human perception, I allowed Iruka to do as he liked. I scanned the wardrobe of clothes. I needed to choose proper attire since leaving the house with no clothes on is apparently illegal. I closed my eyes and tapped into my Wi-Fi to connect to Firefox. I searched modern clothing for men, and it gave me catalogs to choose from. I gathered sufficient data for what would be appropriate and acceptable for school. I neatly took out the slightly ragged jeans, a yellow loose shirt, and an orange zip sweater. I laid them neatly on my dresser and headed for the kitchen. It was 7:15 a.m. and Kakashi was to get ready for work at 7:45 a.m. Kakashi enjoyed taking his time, so I often took it upon myself to prepare breakfast because it would be convenient for Kakashi. When I was done with the omelet, I began to cook the bacon. The chilled slice of thin meat began to wrinkle, curl, and ooze fatty oils. I felt a small weight sit on my foot. I heard a small, begging whine from my right foot. I glanced down. It was a pug named Pakun. Kakashi had an affinity for dogs. I had once asked why Kakashi loved dogs and he told me a story of a dog named Hachiko. The dog was taken in by a human man. When his owner returned from work, the dog would wait at Shibuya Station to greet his owner each day. One tragic day, the professor did not return. He had died from spontaneous bleeding in the brain tissue. Hachiko had waited for his owner to return. With a never-wavering loyalty, Hachiko continued to wait at the train station every day for 9 years before he had finally died. The dog loved his owner and remained loyal till the very end. Kakashi smiled at me when he had informed me the story, but his voice was very sad. He told me that dogs understand what loyalty was, and that dogs value love very much. That sometimes it seems like dogs are more human than actual humans. This was a confusing statement for me to comprehend. I never asked nor corrected Kakashi with his sentence, it just didn't. It didn't seem appropriate to do so. I stared down at the dog, reaching to the heater roller it so that I would not burn the meat that was currently frying in the skillet. Pakun tilted his head, his eyes stared at me in hopes of a piece of the meal I was cooking. This had occurred before, so I took an educated guess that Pakun wanted a piece of bacon. No, Pakun. If I fed you bacon you will develop pancreatitis. I explained. The dog continued to whine and nudged me with its nose as if to coddle his hand pawing my leg. I would not feed him bacon. He could get very sick and things would become very complicated if Pakun passed away from bacon. Kakashi would be distraught and would have trouble functioning to his daily schedule. Then Kakashi's job would be affected negatively, and then income decreases, which leads to many problems that would bore you if I listed them. Soon the bacon was well cooked, so I set the fork, knife, plate, and napkin neatly on the table just as Aruka had taught me. I began to divide the food to balance his diet since Kakashi insists healthy eating was important to him. I remembered a TV commercial using ketchup to decorate the omelet. So I decided to draw the sun using mustard and created grass using wasabi on the omelet. If humans found it delicious eating colorful condiments on their food, then Kakashi would surely enjoy his food now. I sprinkled coconut and cinnamon to better fit Kakashi's taste. I peeled kiwi skins to be a side dish for him. Kiwi skin was an excellent source of nutrition, so Kakashi would no doubt approve. Perhaps he would like it. With his breakfast prepared and waiting to be consumed, I headed to Kakashi's room to awake him from slumber. Pakun obediently followed me into the wooden hallway. Pakun was supposedly my dog. Since Kakashi had insisted on purchasing a gift on the anniversary of my creation, even though I did not require nor desire for possessions of any sort. I was a robot, though it seemed Pakun understood his purpose given to me. He never really gave me much issues. He always behaved and only ever bothered when he wanted to play, be fed, or taken out for walks. Possessions were meaningless to me. What use would a heartless, emotionless robot like I do with them? Kakashi had insisted that it would help my progression for how to be a human. With his reasoning I accepted the gift. Although Pakun had caused more trouble than helpful information for me, no matter how minimal. I twisted the round knob of Kakashi's door and found him heavily asleep. His room was almost completely enveloped by the darkness and was only visible because of my specially adjustable eyesight. Also, the light that escaped from his open door lit the way for me to find Kakashi. He murmured when I poked him in the face to rouse him from slumber. He blinked his eyes open in a quiet, graceful manner. Kakashi looked at him, his pupils adjusting themselves to focus on me. Kakashi slightly flinched and sighed when he processed it was only me, settling down the pillow he was about to throw at me. Naruto, isn't there a better way to wake me up? I swear if you were someone else, would have thought you were a serial killer with how the light dimmed behind you, I swear. Kakashi sighed, getting up from his bed. You said not to wake you up with ice water yesterday morning when I did. I assumed you would have dealt better with a simple nudge when you slept. I explained, watching Kakashi head to the bathroom, making his bed for him. I prepared your meal on the table. I left without a word after that. When he finished dressing himself, but not his hair, he stared at the meal I prepared with a solemn expression. He glanced to me, as if expecting something from me based on his neutral expression, slightly wide eyes, and gently lifted eyebrows. I saw humans enjoyed decorating their foods with colorful condiments. I explained, sitting across from him to watch him eat. He blinked in comprehension. He gave a brief smile before eating. Thank you, Naruto, it's. He scooped up a large piece of omelet and pasty condiments and brought it to his mouth to chew and swallow. He tensed, I felt his heart picking speed and his sweat building up. It's delicious, he said in broken words before continuing, even crying a little. I know he lied, but I don't understand why he did. I simply sat back and watched him finish his meal. He smiled at me, his skin slightly paled, a sign of being unwell. A sign his stomach didn't agree with his meal. Well, with that, I will no doubt be energized for the rest of the day. Shall we head to your school then? He eagerly asked. I nodded silently, my expression not changing. I found it unfit if I changed my expression if I did not fully comprehend the meaning of each emotion. I followed him into his car he called his baby. Although it makes me completely unable to process why Kakashi gives a pet name to an unresponsive, non-living object a pet name. Then again, I too am a non-living object. A machinery to be exact. I do not inquire why humans give pet names, and neither did I require a name, yet I was given one. I was still in the process of understanding human behavior, emotions, and bonds. Why names were relevant to someone's or something's worth. I sat in stillness in the front car seat. I closed my eyes and searched information based on high school behavior. But too many websites were vague, and used too many hyperboles, metaphors, and slang to understand any of it. I found myself unable to think of what to do next. Kakashi placed a hand on my shoulder. His smile was confusing me. I noticed we had reached the tall building, brimming and overflowing with lively adolescent humans. Kakashi spoke in an even, warm voice. Searching online will not give you answers to school, Naruto, but I promise things will be alright. Take care, okay? Kakashi said, quickly adding, if an old man approaches you in a bunny suit, offering you a ride, you run away from him. I gave a slow nod and smoothly reached for the school bag that contained appropriate materials for class. An old man in a bunny suit? I shrugged the mere thought off. I reached out for the door. I was going to learn to be human, or at least understand and be able to mimic emotions. That was my purpose, my sole reason for existing. Then I would be a complete android. I would fulfill my purpose of creation. When the students in my class settled themselves inside their class, the teacher began to explain that there was a new student. I stood there, scanning each human's face. The same species, but so very different. Their body posture combined with their expression were all different, and gave different types of emotions. This would be quite a useful atmosphere for my learning. One boy stood out among the rest. He had dark, dull, black eyes, and his hair was charcoal-colored and looked relatively soft. He was quite out of place compared to his colorful, unique classmates. I was stared at with fascination, though the one with dull eyes held the most interest with his slack body posture, and focused eyes on his book had changed immensely when he saw me. He glared at me, but I smiled as a retort. Shock overtook his face, and somehow I found his expression satisfying. The teacher, with her ruby eyes, cherry lips, and wavy, layered hair, she smiled at me and was introducing my name to the class. Class, this is a new student. He has never been to a public school before, so I expect he is to be welcomed warmly. Her voice was light and seemed gentle, but the end of the last word was dropped a tone lower, as if she was giving the students a wordless warning. His name is Naruto. A boy with odd, red, upside-down triangles under his eyes smirked and spoke up, standing up and interrupted the teacher. I took note of a fresh black eye. Mrs. Kurenai, does that mean he's a bum from the streets? He hollered loudly, laughing to himself. Some other students, mostly boys, joined in on the laughter. Kurenai was not at all pleased and yelled at him to sit down. Kiba, sit down now before I send you to the principal's office. She warned him threateningly. The class settled quickly, quieted down. Kurenai looked at me, and told me to introduce myself. I didn't know if I should smile, so I kept the default expression of my face. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I introduced myself politely. The class is grateful to have you with us. Go take a seat by Sasuke. She pointed the empty desk beside the dark-haired boy. I went to take a seat beside Sasuke. Not many taken seats around Sasuke, he was alone. Some girls whined and let out disappointed groans. I assumed it was because they held a sort of attraction for Sasuke. I am an android, and I certainly do not feel, but I could tell Sasuke was an attractive young man based on his calm demeanor, focused eyes, strong bone structure, sharp eyes, and his black hair. He obviously held a charismatic atmosphere around him, although it seems he was also distant since there was no one sitting by him. People liked him, but if he didn't like people, he probably told them to stay away. But that does not concern me. He wouldn't be able to provide useful information for my data. Without hesitation, I sat beside him. I began to settle into my desk. I saw confused eyes stare at me from the corner of my eye for a brief moment before they disappeared. Hours passed by, and soon it was the beginning of lunch. I was an android, so I did not require to eat, but I did require to drink water so that my tongue, lips and eyes do not dry. I opened my water bottle and began to drink to refill my internal water bar. When it was just about full, I was approached by the same boy who had spoke out in class, with a handful of other students with him. Kiba had a pursed smile, one eyebrow slightly narrowed. He darted his eyes to me. His heart rate was slightly faster than an average human. About earlier, I meant it as a fun joke, but it was crossing the line. I didn't mean to offend ya. I don't know when to shut my big mouth, so I usually screw up when I speak. He began to speak, his sentence speeding up in certain parts. His weight continuously shifted from one foot to the other. He was anxious and guilty. I made an hypothesis that Kiba was trying to apologize and ask for my forgiveness. I would not usually answer since I did not have an opinion, but if I ignored him, he may take it the wrong way and consider me a stubborn, unpleasant human, and besides, I was sure that his black eyes was from my shoe. I could not risk that on my first day since I was programmed to be intelligent. I wasn't offended, so you don't have to apologize, I said plainly, wondering why he had brought so many people with him. A girl who tied her platinum blonde hair up smiled at me, elbowing Kiba in the stomach. I'm Ino. Kiba can say a lot of douchebag things, but he's a nice guy deep down, she added. Another girl, who seemed relatively close to the blonde girl, also smiled and sat beside me. She had pink hair and moss green eyes. Kiba sent a small glare to Ino. I am not that much of a douche, he argued. Soon they were arguing in the background. Well then you're an idiot then. 'Cause he kept telling us that a shoe fell from the sky and had hit you. Why the fuck would a shoe randomly fly? Bitch, it's true. Where the heck do ya think Ma Bruise came from? Probably some idiotic idea you had. What did you? My name is Sakura. Which school did you go? The pink girl asked, standing in front of me to block out Ino and Kiba's arguing. School required to study. I never thought it was required since all the information I already knew was from downloaded data Kakashi had provided me. Before I could answer, a boy with spiky, brown, tied-up hair, with rather bored expression spoke. He obviously isn't homeless. Look at his clothes. He doesn't seem stupid, so he probably was homeschooled up until now. He finished his sentence with a brief yawn. I remember that he was asleep for about 83.7% of the class. I believe his name was Shikamaru since the teacher called his name multiple times to wake him up. I nodded at the answer. It was as close as the actual truth. Kakashi warned me not to give away the truth. Both girls let out a noise of brief surprise. They smiled at me, and the pink girl spoke. So that must mean you're really smart. Which parent taught you? It must be your mom since I saw your dad drop you off at school, she asked eagerly. I don't have a mother, I replied plainly. Everyone's happy expression dropped. They were uncomfortable. Did I say something wrong? Kiba was the first to speak up. Sorry to hear about that. We didn't mean to bring that up. I assumed he was hinting at my mother passing away. Don't feel bad. I never had a mother because I grew up with two fathers, I corrected him calmly. Everyone's eyes widened and in miraculous unison. What? They questioned, their eyes wide with shock, obviously not expecting that. I suppose it wasn't common that two homo lovers raise a child. I know from data that majority people have accepted homoles, but there were still the people against it. Sorry, does it bother you? I asked, interested in what their answer would be. They all shook their heads. We were just surprised, ya know? Ino spoke up, smiling happily. She was telling the truth because her muscles in her face were relaxed and her body posture wasn't stiff. Sakura grinned. So how long have your parents been together? She asked with excitable curiosity. Since they were teenagers. I admitted, I couldn't tell them they were married for only 6 years. It wouldn't have made sense to them, since I was designed to look like a young adult, while it would have been a complicated mess if they found out my parents were only in their mid-20s. Ino and Sakura squealed in excitable whispers. Soon the bell rang, signaling 20 minutes till lunch was over. Everyone said goodbye to me to get their correct books for class, but had invited me to eat lunch with them every day if I wanted a chance to observe humans. I agreed. I went out for a curt walk because I needed to check on the odd noise I heard from the window I sat by. I heard some yelling and banging while I was walking along the perimeter of the school and saw the odd, dark-haired boy being held back by his hands behind his back. He was forced on his knees. His hair was gripped tightly by a group of unrecognizable students. It was clear they were from a different school with their yellow uniforms. A girl with bright hair smirked at Sasuke. She knelt down to his level. Their faces were an inch apart. Is little prissy bitch boy tired? We're tired too, but we're not finished with you at all. Sorry, Sasuke-chan. She got up and turned around to approach a metal pipe. She took the time to spit in his face. Disgusting, I thought. Kakashi had told me that humans held grudges, anger, and hate. Because some humans enjoyed hurting others, watching other people suffer. Kakashi explained to me that violence was never the answer. It doesn't solve anything, it just gets more people hurt. That was his first lesson he taught me for human behavior. I had asked him why humans would do such things, to resort to violence. Kakashi simply shook his head, and told me, I don't know, and I don't expect to ever truly understand why. I suppose most people that like to hurt others are also very sad inside. So I ran forward, in front of Sasuke. Sasuke outnumbered, cornered, and beaten. In every sense, this wasn't right nor fair. I felt the metal bar collide to my head, a sharp, loud sound resounded. I landed on my hands, and caught myself with my hands before crashing in the ground. There was silence, soon there was a clang. The pipe was dropped, and dry footsteps were followed by the bullies. I glanced up to the red-haired woman. Don't resort to violence, it doesn't solve anything, I said, not affected by the blow to the head. Although the humans were very delicate when it came to their head, Kakashi built me to withstand damage, especially to the head. It was where my heart was located. Kakashi had used every drop of resources he could to protect my heart. Questioning why he would waste so much money for something insignificant such as a machine that cannot feel anything, he simply replied to me with a happy voice, because I love you. Before I realized it, they were running away. What were they even thinking? Fighting and beating a boy at a school. I suppose they didn't care whether or not they would get in trouble. Humans are so confusing. I turned to the dark-haired man, taking note of his messed demeanor. Messy clothes, torn shirt, bloody nose, cut lip, and a slight bruise decorating his cheek like a purple flower. Judging on the footprints on his shirt, they were kicking him. Are you alright? I thought back to the woman calling him Sasuke. Sasuke? I asked. It would be troublesome if Sasuke ended up dying on the first day of my school. He was shocked, and he looked horrified even. Maybe a little scared. Did I do something wrong again? With the ongoing silence and shock, I began to repeat myself if he was alright, but he interrupted me. Are you alright? He asked, in a broken sentence. He was choking on his own blood from his nose. I nodded, taking out a napkin for him to use. I'm fine, really, you look worse for wear, I said, but he grabbed my arm and began to drag me towards the school, not even accepting my napkin. Sasuke. Why are you dragging me? Are you I was interrupted by his slightly panicked voice. You were hit by a fucking pipe in the head. I'm doing fine compared to your injury. I'm taking you to the school nurse, you idiotic loser. He explained in a harsh tone. You're an idiot for getting involved. He added. I was confused, did I not help him? I'm sorry, I thought you needed assistance. I apologized for no reason. He didn't say anything. I didn't try to resist since I didn't understand his intentions. I potentially saved his life, so I assumed he had good intentions. I was correct. He took me to the school nurse Shizune. Shizune examined my head thoroughly. Despite insisting I was in perfect shape, Sasuke seemed to think otherwise. I don't care if you think you're alright, you got bashed in the head. I know you're an idiot to think it's nothing, but you took a blow that was supposed to be mine. So at least check yourself if you're alright, he said, his eyes darted away, looking somewhat guilty. I wasn't sure what he meant by all of those words he said, but with human behavior, humans can be stubborn. So perhaps this was his roundabout way of saying thank you. Shizune sighed as she examined my head with her fingers. I can't believe you got an innocent student involved, Sasuke. Sasuke grunted. Well, how bad is it? He asked, his voice sounded slightly concerned. Well, there's no injury. She scrunched her eyebrows in confusion. She crossed her arms in front of her chest. Thinking of an answer to this mystery, she looked into the file cabinet and pulled out what looked like my file. Her hip hit the file drawer, closing it shut. For a brief moment she simply read and flipped through the papers. Wait. Her eyes widened, and she sounded relieved. She set down my document on the table. You're the new student, yes? She inquired. I nodded. She dropped her hands to the side and smiled. She exhaled in a loose breath of air. Her tight, worried face had relaxed. You should be fine then. She mused happily, placing a warm hand on my head. It was warm. I nodded once again. I am. I told you I was fine. Sasuke slammed his fist in the wall, grabbing Shizun's attention, and mine as well. I told you. He isn't fine, his head was bashed by a fucking metal pipe. You're insane to think he's alright. He grabbed my arm and was headed for the door. I pulled back for a bit, but he jerked me closer and increased his walking pace. I'm bringing you to the hospital, you are no way fine. His voice quivered. Was he frightened at the thought that I may die? Did he feel scared? Did he feel fear? Why worry for me? Because I helped him? Because I put myself out to save him? Because he thought I was human? Would he have done the same if knew I was an android? Soon he was stopped by Shizun's arm grabbing him. He is fine, Sasuke. She gave him a reassuring nod and smile. They met eyes. Sasuke opened his mouth to protest but was stopped short by Shizun. Naruto isn't hurt. He's a human android. Sasuke seemed resentful and hesitant when we walked side by side on the road. I suppose it only made sense. I did insist on taking him to a place where he was to be dealt with. I wasn't sure why he came without protest when it was so clear he was uncomfortable. Strangely enough, the neighborhood of normally upbeat, happy humans was deadly silent. It had seemed they were out at the moment. Sasuke stopped abruptly. I kept a close observation of his short breathing patterns. His face was still and blank, but I could tell by his body's reactions he was weary of me. I saved him, he knew that, but he was fearful. I too stopped my stride. I turned on the back of my heels slowly to meet his darkened eyes. He scanned my features, then he repeated the visionary motion to my body. He returned his gaze to mine. His eyes turned thinner and he let out a disapproving noise through his nose. Although he seemed to disapprove of me, his hitched breath told me he found something of me intriguing. His seemingly flawless ivory complexion that was complemented by his ebony hair and eyes were what I had found interesting. Indeed, it was not surprising females found him attractive. His features were pleasant to the visionary aspect of things. His personality, however, was quite bitter and somewhat distant on his reactions to women who approached him. Not surprised his peers avoided him. His unreasonable, distant and icy tone was also evidence he was withdrawn. Despite all of that, he did not hesitate to help me when I had taken the blow to the head, so regardless of his stubborn denial, he cared about people, that much I knew. But it seems denial was a common thing for Sasuke. How odd. Why do you even attend school if you're a robot? I thought you're supposed to be smart. He commented sharply, his nose slightly tilted up, his eyes looking forward that avoided my eyes. My head looked forward as well, to see what he stared at. Nothing. I continued to walk to reach our destination. Although my programming is indeed quite intelligent and knowledgeable with information of basic human education, there are things I cannot be taught by a simple download. I answered slowly, hoping he would calm his rather unpredictable emotions. He snorted, or laughed in bafflement and doubt. What is it you're trying to learn then? He asked, his voice was mocking, but his eyes held genuine curiosity based on his attentive eyes and bored body posture. I turned to the left, not bothering to look at Sasuke. I was watching for any care or out-of-control cars. None. I wasn't very surprised. Based on how long I've lived with Kakashi, this entire neighborhood was difficult to live in since only wealthy humans could inhabit such large houses. The added requirement of the government's personal permission made it nearly impossible to live in this deserted land. However, drunk teenagers would drive recklessly around this area, so oftentimes you had to be careful where you walk. To feel. I answered his question. He gave me a confused expression before it quickly morphed back into his stoic demeanor. I did not blame him for such a reaction. It was unheard of machines to feel, but Kakashi believed I could do so because I was programmed to learn how to feel. With this in mind, I slowly directed us to the side of the road instead of the middle. Paying no heed to his eyes that observed me, I noticed we reached the gates to Kakashi's house. It was a fairly large mansion with 36 rooms. It was surrounded by a tall brick wall with only the front gate to allow passage into it. I punched in the number code beside the gate. There was a click, and the gates began to swing open. Whose house is this? Sasuke hesitated to walk past the gates. His expression were questionable. His eyes were narrowed, and his eyebrows were harshly pointing down. He looked up the tall house as if figuring out why such a large house would hold something unusual like me. I turned to him, blankly staring at him before speaking. Kakashi Hitaki, my creator. He wishes to speak with you. Kakashi was emailed by me that Sasuke had found out who I was, so he would more than likely be ready to deal with Sasuke. Kakashi was a gentle man. He used to be more sharp around the edges until Iruka had come along in his life, or so he told me. In any case, Kakashi wouldn't hurt Sasuke. I had faith in Kakashi. Sasuke followed along the path I lead him. The front of the house was filled with garden. It was filled with many sorts of plants. Roses, plumeria, violets, lilies, sweet peas, gardenia, hyacinth, peonies, and lilac. Sweet aromas came from the fumes of the flowers. Sweet, fragile, fresh. The scents of the flowers stained the air with a pleasant, calming effect. Sasuke had slowed his pace following me. He was observing the flowers. "I assume you like the garden?" My head turned to the side to observe him. Was all he said through his nose, but he nodded curtly in silence. He paid close attention to one lone flower. A black cat petunia. "I grew this garden by myself," I informed him, though I wasn't quite sure why I told him. Because it seemed to be his best interest at the moment? No, that wasn't why I told him. I wanted to? My pondering thoughts disappeared as we reached the front of the pale blue house. The window frames were painted a soft yellow and white. The house itself was very light in color. It was peaceful to look at. Kakashi was found to be sitting on the front yard, his face seeming calm, and his eyes focused on a book. Sasuke was slightly behind, admiring the flowers, although I doubt he would admit he was the type to be stubbornly stiff when it came to honesty. Kakashi felt my presence and gently closed the book and allowed it to rest in his lap, his fingers stuck between the pages he was reading. His eyes seemed calm. He noticed Sasuke and looked to me. "Is that him?" he questioned. Although it was very obvious it was him, I nodded slowly. Kakashi's eyes briefly glanced at Sasuke before he mused quietly and waved his hand absent-mindedly at me, his eyes still staring at Sasuke. Did Kakashi know him? "Naruto, you go sleep while Sasuke and I discuss things." Usually by sleep, he meant I was to recharge. I wanted to ask why since I didn't require to charge for a few days, but I decided to refrain from questioning him when Kakashi looked at me from the side. "Go." I gave a nod of understanding, so I headed inside the house, opening the door and closing it behind me with a click. I headed to the place I referred as my bed. I pressed the smaller button ebbing my earlobe. A wire soon extended once I pulled it out. Settling myself neatly on my sheets as I plugged the wire into the lid of my charger beside my bed on the wooden nightstand, I stared at the window, a red bird and a bluebird sand together. Faint sounds of chatter began to fade and soon it faded to nothing as my sight blurred. Recognizing machinery. Connecting. Entering sleep mode. Kakashi kept his eyes staring down at Sasuke. What a coincidence. A strange one. Perhaps all of this was meant to be. Fate was quite humorous. Sasuke froze. Kakashi took amusement to Sasuke's expression. The tall, proud, and uncaring Uchiha. Sasuke never once seems to care for anyone, he never swayed to anyone. He was an unmoving human with a frozen heart. But it seemed he was different when it comes to Naruto. The irony. A human that refuses to feel anything and an android learning to feel. Sasuke the one who avoids human company, while Naruto wanted human company. "I won't tell Itachi you're here," he assured before Sasuke would have the sense to run. Sasuke relaxed his shoulders only a little, his eyes and body were still very cautious. How normal of him. "Shall we talk?" He gestured Sasuke to take the seat across from him. His question was at a more personal level than simply talking. The Uchiha family was at the center of a powerful electronics company. Naturally, the Uchiha family was a strong supporter of Kakashi's research. They swore confidentiality on his personal research of androids as long as he provided discrete technology to keep their business atop. He had no qualms with such a proposition, however, he always made sure to be able to manipulate every piece he gave to the Uchiha family. Sometimes the Uchiha family was known to be too ambitious. He recalled Madara, an unpleasant example of how far an Uchiha would go. Taking over the world. Slowly, Sasuke took the offered seat and glared at Kakashi. There was that famous Uchiha glare. Kakashi smiled nonchalantly and shifted to sit forward to converse properly with Sasuke. Kakashi was happy to see Sasuke had grown up. But it seemed he was closed off more than before after the incident of his parents' murder. A vile man was schizophrenic, and he murdered the Uchiha family in a maddened state. His name was Orochimaru. It was not his entire fault because of his tormented mind, but luckily he turned himself in, too heavy with guilt. Despite this, it seems Sasuke still wanted some sort of revenge. Itachi and Sasuke were the only left. Itachi was sympathetic, and forgave Orochimaru eventually, but Sasuke had refused to forgive that man. Sasuke also held a grudge over Itachi for refusing to get revenge over Orochimaru. So he ran away to get back at Itachi. How childish of him. Itachi was naturally upset but had to stay to keep the company in order to maintain their household. Nonetheless, Itachi searched for Sasuke relentlessly. They were the only family left. Of course, Itachi wanted to find Sasuke. Kakashi also took note that he should keep his eyes open for Sasuke as well. Kakashi wouldn't tell Itachi he found Sasuke, not yet. Itachi was abroad Germany at the moment for business. And Sasuke showed promising interest in Naruto. To get more results, he should be on Sasuke's good side. This was a golden opportunity. So, it seems you have found my project I had worked on. I take it it's intriguing? Kakashi asked, taking in Sasuke's glance at the door that Naruto had gone through. His dark eyes glowed with a small glimmer of life. He's rather idiotic for an android. He commented. Ouch. Kakashi felt his ego weep like baby. Hey, you have to admit he's pretty cool, right? He asked hopefully, gripping his book. Kakashi sighed. Couldn't Sasuke say anything more? He threw himself in front of me when some bitch as her fucking goons were beating me. He's a brainless moron, a defective idiot, Sasuke said plainly, turning his head slightly to the right, his eyes averted to avoid Kakashi's stare. Out of slight embarrassment, Sasuke coughed. Kakashi's eyebrow raised upward. Sasuke was manhandled by a couple of women and supposedly panicked to bring Naruto to the hospital from the mail he received. It was a blue moon. Well, I won't tell Itachi I saw you or that you're here as long as you promise to keep the secret of Naruto. He offered graciously, turning his book open to his story he was reading. Oh, the main characters were fighting. This was interesting. Sasuke hesitated, he frowned and seemed to want to get up and leave without a word. He seemed to glare with hate. Kakashi was afraid that it turned out like this. Sasuke was so much more closed off than before. He must have avoided from ever making friends, from ever allowing anyone inside his heart. Kakashi already saw the hardened look of Sasuke. Kakashi had closed off others before. He knew what was going on in Sasuke's head. Was it impossible to reach Sasuke anymore? But to his surprise, Sasuke nodded agreeably. It was late but he said yes. He trusted Kakashi enough, or maybe Sasuke didn't like the idea of exposing Naruto when he had saved him. Sasuke got up from his seat to head for the gate to leave. Now, Sasuke. You forgot something, Tilda. Kakashi sang with amusement, eyeing Sasuke's flat back. Sasuke stopped his walking. How many times had he halted his walking today? The idiot can walk by himself. I'm headed back to school. Sasuke reasoned coldly. Kakashi faked a whimpering cry, wiping his eyes of imaginary tears. Oh, but poor Naruto might just shut down in the streets because of the sacrifice. My son I wanted, dead. Kakashi refrained from smiling at Sasuke's shoulders tensing slightly. He was getting to him. So he continued his little act. A person would pick him up, and probably rape his delicious body I've molded to perfection. My only son I wanted to raise. Gone and tortured. Sasuke grew more tense as Kakashi continued his ramble of possible scenarios if Naruto was taken if he shut down. An old perverted man would just pop by wearing a bunny suit, offering Naruto a ride. Okay, so maybe Sasuke was worried about what might happen to Naruto. And then they might take apart and use him foe. Alright, I'll walk the idiot back to school. Sasuke snapped angrily, his heart feeling relieved but he wouldn't admit that he felt guilty. Kakashi beamed at him. Well, you can go get him. You can see the proof he isn't human. Just follow the hallway and the last door in front is his room. Just be quiet when waking him, he can be a little flinchy when he's sleeping. He explained when Sasuke headed for the door. Sasuke was in the hallway. It was dark and cold, his steps were slow and steady. The wooden floor below him was new but they seemed to creak if he took a slow step, a squeak if the step was quick. He was anxious and maybe a little paranoid in the dark. He was in the same house. All alone, with a robot that could potentially go mutinous and chop off his head like an apple. No, he was not scared. Like many things, Uchihas do not cower, nor do they feel guilty, and they most certainly do not worry. So his accelerated heartbeat and sweat development was because the weather was hot and that he was probably stressed. Yeah, that was it. Totally. He took one last step and it squeaked sharply. He flinched, his heart dropped and he took a jumpy step back. He turns his head to from all sides. No Kakashi in the hallway. Despite from flinching, his expression was always its default. Cold and unfeeling. No one saw, so it never happened. So Sasuke assured himself. He took a deep breath and went on. His pale hand clenched the silvery knob. The shine of the color reminded him of glistening oyster shells. He twisted the knob and pushed forward, feeling a little ridiculous. The room was lit to his surprising. People usually sleep in the dark. Oh wait. Naruto wasn't human. There was small falling feeling he felt in his chest when he remembered, but Sasuke excused it as fatigue. He saw the blue bed at the corner across from Sasuke. He blinked before stepping forward to Naruto. He was about to shake Naruto to rouse him from his charging. His hand, however, found the wire behind Naruto's earlobe. Sasuke's cold hand was surprised at the warmth and softness of Naruto's skin. So very warm, so soft. Sasuke's wandering hand reached for Naruto's lock of hair that was sticking out. His fingers connected the hair strands and pushed it out of his face. He focused on how golden Naruto's hair was, then to the light auburn-colored eyelashes Naruto had. The tan skin seemed to glow in health and warmth. He looked so beautiful. With the marks on his cheek, it was almost a sign he was special. He was special. So warm, so pure, so not human. No human could have been so flawless. His hand trailed to his jaw, it was sharp and strong, a clear sign that Naruto was a man. Sasuke stroked his cheeks softly, satisfied with the soft texture and smooth feeling. So perfect. Sasuke took notice of Naruto's lips. They seemed untouched, slightly pink, soft, and enticing. His hand was close to the lips. His thumb traced his bottom lip. He was so vulnerable. In a daze, Sasuke cupped Naruto's cheek, taking note there were no signs of Naruto awakening. He leaned forward, tilting his head in an angle to capture his lips. They were so soft, so addicting. He felt sharp tingles runs down his spine and pulse throughout his body. He didn't want to stop. The gentle lips were so pure. Sasuke pressed deeper, raising his arm to place on the stiff mattress to act as support when he pressed his body weight to make the kiss deepen. He wanted to mark Naruto. He was so pure and foreign to everything human. His fingers dug into the soft sheets to refrain himself. He eventually pulled away. It was one of the downsides of having limited breathing. A soft pant escaped his lips. Reality hit him heavy like a brick, slamming out his dazed state and allowed his rational side resurface. His eyes widened, standing back up and stumbled behind. Horror flooded every nerve in his body. Oh God, what did I really kiss him? He asked himself even though he knew the truth. He felt dizzy. What had he done? What came over him? Sasuke was confused and didn't notice the intense, sapphire eye gazing upon him in question and shock. Sasuke. Sasuke jerks his head, his thoughts far too out of whack to bring himself together to return to his withdrawn face. Naruto got up, reaching for the back of the earlobe Sasuke had touched earlier. Sasuke heard a small click, and saw the wire that connects to the blinking square begin to withdraw back into Naruto's earlobe. He kissed a fucking robot. Naruto turned his head to Sasuke, noticing the darkened pink shade on Sasuke's lips. Please don't ask, he begged silently. Sasuke, why did you kiss me? When you sleep, you are in a way dead. You are vulnerable to attackers and death. Nothing can protect you. A person could steal a kiss from you as you sleep without you ever knowing. You'll never know if a person stole a kiss from you. But I would know, because to sleep means I can still hear and feel. I felt a quivering breath tickle the thin layer on my skin. A soft hand carcasses the side of my cheek, tracing my jawline with his rough fingers. The coldness from his fingers made me think of a sharpened knife tracing my skin instead. Soon I felt a passionate, soft warmth that pressed themselves softly to my lips. The soft lips seemed shy and adventurous. Soon, things escalated into a more desperate need. His pacing of delirious need increased. His hand gripped the sheets in pleasure. His mouth parted only slightly. I knew very well it was Sasuke. The scent was the same, it smelled lightly of earth and a spray of spiced apples. A bold tongue ventured into my mouth, but only into shallow areas of my front teeth. His body heat shot high levels into heat. I began tracing endorphin levels were beginning to appear. Never once did we part away. Oftentimes this would lead to. I decided that before things got too far I would stop him by pushing away his body that he forced onto me. But before I could, he pulled away. Human limits of air was his reason to pull away. With his heavy breaths were shallow and desperate, as if to catch his breath as soon as possible. I opened my eyes and sat up. I still felt the damp saliva coating my lips from him. When my own eyes had met his surprised ones, it seemed as if time slowed, which would be impossible since time in fact, did not stop since the earth was in constant movement. Was my internal clock damaged? Why did you kiss me? I asked intelligently. I was utterly baffled to why he would kiss me. Kissing was a sign of affection, on the lips meant intimacy. For some odd reason, my system was heating up rapidly. His eyes widened and he looked away, storming out the room. I noticed the flash of red that adorned his cheeks like blood on snow. Blushing, he was embarrassed? But wasn't he the one that kissed me? I stood up to my feet. I staggered for a moment since my system wasn't prepared to move suddenly. To my advantage, my body was not made to have limits. So swiftly, I managed to grab his arm. At the same time his hand was gripping the knob of the door. Why did you kiss me? The repeated question arose once more. I felt my system heat up when his eyes averted from mine. He was silent. I felt impatience? Sasuke blushed harder. He was wondering himself, why did he kiss Naruto? It couldn't have been because he was attracted to the blonde robot. Well, Naruto did have unruly, flaxen hair that seems to glow a good color in the light. His eyes were bright and colorful with different moods of blue. And when his soft lips would curl into a smile, it made me oh god he had a crush on Naruto. Sasuke turned his head to Naruto. His eyes were cold once more. It was nothing. Naruto knew immediately it was a lie, but he didn't press the matter. Naruto was taught it was not good to pry upon personal matters such as the current situation, so he nodded. Silence were the words that were exchanged, and silence was the mood when Naruto and Sasuke had exited the house. Kakashi gave Naruto a knowing look, as if he was observing a unique plant among the garden. Kakashi only waved goodbye to them. Naruto would nod and meet Kakashi's eyes to let him know that he understood his gesture, while for Sasuke, he simply sneered at Kakashi and turned to walk away in a hostile manner. As we walked down the still silent streets, Sasuke seemed troubled with how his normally straight back was slacked, and his usual callous expression was now bemused in thoughts. He wasn't paying attention to anything with how unfocused his pupils were. I pondered if it was a good decision to say something to him. I just didn't like how uncomfortable the situation was. It seemed today I was deciding a lot of my feelings. Though it was a good question if I was truly influenced by emotions, then again, at the moment there was no malfunctions in my systems. Quiet patter of footsteps were the only difference between sound and silence. Eventually we reached the school grounds again. However, Sasuke not once gave a glance towards me or spoke a single word. Sasuke ignored me and treated me as if I was not in his presence. He knew I was there, but he only walked away. Within my decisions and options that were available, I chose to return to class rather than pursue him since it would not be an intelligent decision. He seemed to be experiencing an internal battle. School was more important with the wider range of unique students that was available to me anyway. I wouldn't have learned anything from Sasuke with the barren amount of emotions he showed. Sasuke would provide insignificant information to the other students. The decision was obvious. I let him walk away as I too turned my back on him. Then we walked our separate paths. Not only did they distance themselves away physically that day, they no longer acknowledged each other. Oddly enough, I felt like this wasn't the first time we separated. Almost like we've done this before. Separating ways. Students and teachers noticed the odd behavior whenever Naruto and Sasuke were near each other. Sasuke would insult Naruto and would walk out the room during lunch if Naruto was in the class. While for Naruto, he occasionally would stare out the window, which was extremely off because Naruto was the perfect student. Smart, which appealed to the teachers. Neutral, fair, and tolerant, which made students favor him. It also helped that Naruto was the best athletic student, but was always humble. Curious students often approached Sasuke and Naruto what was wrong between the two because when they asked Sasuke what happened, he would insult the asking student and tell them there was nothing wrong to begin with. This was a quaint reaction, because a normal Sasuke would have ignored the person that was asking, so despite his denial, it was clear something was wrong. With Naruto, he would stare at you as if he was a frozen robot having trouble processing the information. Funny enough, the students never realized the irony in that simile to compare his blank reaction. Naruto would stare at you with a plain expression and say there was nothing wrong, but to a human, it was pretty obvious something was off. But like how life was, time continued its daily duties to make the days pass by. By a blink of an eye it was already a month. Deciding the strained distance between them, Naruto decided to confront Sasuke by approaching him at lunch. A normal human would have had difficulty searching for Sasuke during lunch. The reason was because Sasuke preferred slipping away and disappear like air to avoid people. But thanks to the benefits of being an android, it wasn't much of a chore to locate Sasuke's whereabouts. Somehow initiating a conversation with Sasuke would be an issue. Naruto was able to identify that Sasuke's pride would be an issue. Humans he had observed were proud rather than humble. So he decided to take a roundabout route to fix their bone, whatever it was. Approach Sasuke for help. When the bell chimed for the start of lunch, Naruto found Sasuke on the back of the school. Like typical melodramatic TV shows and books, the wind blew on Sasuke's hair wistfully. His face seemed troubled in thoughts or possibly confused. In any case, Naruto was not hesitant to ignore the warning glare Sasuke gave when their eyes met. Naruto stared unamused. "You're avoiding me. Why?" The wind abruptly stopped. Sasuke didn't move for the next few seconds. A silent duel to make him submit was initiated. Sasuke's eyes were filled with unreasonable contempt, and Naruto's eyes were surprisingly not empty, they held curiosity. Sasuke didn't understand why Naruto sought out for him since he never established a bond. It would have made sense if Naruto had approached him to question about the kiss, but from the look in his eyes, it wasn't just that. Naruto had a request for Sasuke Uchiha. Something only he could do. Sasuke held his words back to see how things play, then he would decide the next action. That's what he did, wait and then take action. Ignoring the silence, Naruto continued. "I want you to help me. I don't have anyone at school that can explain human behavior to me. You're the only one with the knowledge of what I really am. Can you help me understand humans?" Both were silent for the next seconds. The glass eyes met human ones. Sasuke only answered one of his questions with another question. His eyebrows angled closer to his eyes to form his chilling glare that would send ripples of goosebumps on a person's skin. But Naruto wasn't affected since he wasn't just any person. "Why is it so important to you? You're an android, you can't be human. For something like you, it's impossible." Sasuke made sure to emphasize the word something, instead of saying someone. Although he felt no malicious feelings towards Naruto, he wanted to set a line between them, because deep down he couldn't forgive the android for making him feel affection towards him. Naruto wasn't human, he was a piece of machinery. Sasuke observed the curious android. He knew that he shouldn't be falling for Naruto so fast. The flawless android was charming from all aspects, how he smiled, his eyes, and his voice. Sasuke resisted the urge to close the gap between both of them. It wasn't right. Naruto wasn't human. He wasn't supposed to feel an odd urge to feel Naruto's skin, and it wasn't meant to last, because no one else knew better than Sasuke that humans are unreliable. But maybe he had enough to be alone. Maybe his pride wouldn't allow him to admit the truth. It seemed weak to fear isolation, so he stood his ground. Naruto was silent, his eyes narrowed and stared at the ground, his head dropping just a bit. It seemed that he was upset by Sasuke's comment. But surely it was fake. "I want to be a human. I was programmed to be curious of humans, but I was given a certain freedom most machines do now have. I have free will. I know that to be human, I have much to understand, but if I am correct, I am beginning to feel. I am able to say I have my own wish. I want to feel happy, bitter, angry, and sad. And right now." Naruto lifted his hand to his chest, slightly to the left, where the human heart was to hide behind fleshy skin, and not a metallic crust. He closed his eyes. "I feel whole. Always I was alone, never knowing the true appreciation of human company. I can say I have friends, and I want to stay by their side. So that's why I want to be more human. admitted Naruto. Highlighted blue eyes stared at Sasuke's dark eyes that were framed by even darker bangs. Sasuke leaned against the school wall and wet his bottom lip thoughtfully. The dark eyes looked to the side to observe the trees, as if he was bored and uninterested. Why should Sasuke help Naruto if he doesn't get anything out of it? Naruto didn't allow Sasuke's monosyllabic sentence to be the end of their conversation. A compromise then? He suggested, instantly catching the interested gleam in Sasuke's eyes when he looked up to Naruto again. With a slow nod, Sasuke agreed. Then what do you propose, Sasuke? Asked Naruto. For an odd reason, Naruto felt dread in his question, already regretting to agree a compromise with Sasuke. With past knowledge, Sasuke was unpredictable. I'll help you understand humans, if you kiss once a day until the end of the year. Like all humans, it's very hard to predict them. Actions, reactions, thoughts, and words. It's all very different. Always, their actions and behavior will be unpredictable, and explaining them in a logical way is even more challenging to explain. Some humans' existence mean little to nothing to the world. No matter how much money they have, no matter what heroics they had achieved, no matter how they die, they are all the same, meaningless organisms that walk on the same hardened earth. They all die a meaningless death. Everything they do is a small drop in the bucket. It doesn't matter what they do, but the drops leave ripples. Evidence of their life, because they try to live their life. So can an android truly feel? Can a metal machine with no pumping organs leave a dent in the prejudiced world whom humans live in? Maybe not. Time would tell. But that still didn't explain why Sasuke wanted a kiss from Naruto. What a mystery. What a pain. What an utter bother. Sasuke Uchiha. Background. Orphaned at a young age, parents lost in a fire. Academic student, a survivor along with his older brother. To be honest, Naruto knew Sasuke Uchiha had a right to be distant towards others. It was probably a defense mechanism so that Sasuke would never experience loss again. But every human loses things as time passes by. Even Naruto will lose Kakashi and Iruka. His thoughts regarding that immediately stopped because his battery had suddenly dropped to 23%, and some of his nerve wires had stopped functioning, making his body seem heavier and slower. Back to the present, Sasuke had requested a kiss once a day. The reason behind such a request was that Sasuke knew a robot was to be emotionless and unfeeling, but he was closer to that definition than Naruto. Naruto was warm and honest, but Sasuke was detached and bitter. If Sasuke was human, then what would that make Naruto? Things were never so complicated until now. You were either a human or not. Nowadays we classify people as heartless, liars, unmoving, or the opposite, sweet, warm, and loving. We describe some people as inhuman when they believe what is considered immoral, right? In order to be loved, you must follow a set of rules so that you will not be hated. 1. Be humble. Not overly, just a little. 2. Lie over the small things. 3. Smile a lot. 4. Be funny. If you seem to have offended another person, apologize sincerely. 5. Never ostracize someone for their decisions. 6. Be positive. 7. Never ever fall in love. These rules are simple. Just be perfect. Love is an imperfection. But what should be remembered is that even if you followed the rules obediently, it cannot be guaranteed you will be happy. Nothing is a guarantee for happiness. At the moment, yes, but nothing lasts forever. Even Naruto won't last forever. He knew it, but didn't care because he didn't know how. Which was why Naruto decided wasting time was not a wise choice to do. Compliantly he nodded to Sasuke's quaint request. The stiff-chest Sasuke normally held out pridefully exhaled in implied relief. It was set in stone. Sasuke would aid Naruto if he suddenly broke down in school and help his break down human behavior. To Sasuke, he would say he knew what he was doing and would certainly act like it, but for this situation, he had no idea what he was doing. He gave up denying his feelings for Naruto, but if you asked him, he would sneer at you and comment of the idiocy you must have suffered to think of a question like that. Ambitious, rude, cold, proud, and unmoving. This is what defines an Uchiha. Uchihas were no doubt a frightening type of humans. But when they fall in love, they develop into something even more alarming. When Uchihas fall in love, they take what they want without fear, and never give up until they have what they want. That is the way of Uchihas. That saying, this was the basic concept of their behavior. It doesn't mean some don't falter, mess up, or embarrass themselves. Uchihas were certainly scary in a way, but they were still human. And humans still make mistakes. This story will be focused on the endeavors of Sasuke Uchiha's love life. It sounds like a comical sort of story, doesn't it? But when a human falls in love with an android, it is a guarantee, it will never end well. As promised, Naruto never once failed to kiss Sasuke on the like every day. But what he failed in was to give emotions in the kiss. Did Naruto enjoy the kiss? Did he hate it? Was he confused? What did Naruto think and feel? Sasuke did want to know, but refused to ask. He wouldn't stoop so low to ask. The kisses were light presses against his lips, although it was mild to what Sasuke had experienced before. Somehow, it made him feel tingly on his lips. It was almost pleasant. Almost. Eventually he needed to confront this denial, and fate can only wait so long. Today was like any school day. Girls chatting away their concerns and gossip, boys roughhousing in the hallways, teachers smiling and educating their students. Exams were approaching and it was a busy month, students busily studying and panicking. Sasuke and Naruto didn't have the issue of most students. When it came to school, they used their time well and understood subjects fluidly. Also, the fact that both were socially awkward helped, although Naruto was beginning to flourish with people at lunch. However, today at lunch, Naruto approached Sasuke. Why do humans have liquid escaping their eyes when they are upset? I don't understand. It doesn't benefit the human body. It rids the human body of H2O, which is fairly bad. Naruto asked with his normally plain eyes. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at Naruto's expression, displeased. There wasn't a single sign of emotion. Sasuke just wanted to see Naruto show raw emotion, happy, angry, hate and love. He wanted those dead blue eyes, glow with happiness and energy. Was that so much to ask for? Perhaps a bit considering Naruto wasn't not human. So many questions and desires. Why are you asking? Humans cry to clean dirt or grime that get in their eyes. You should know that. That's not right. Naruto corrected, his eyes seemingly confused as he stared to the ground. Sasuke tilted his head to a slight angle, silently questioning what he meant by the unsure tone of his words. You remember our gym teacher Guy? Sasuke turned away. Of course he remembered. Guy was an extremely emotionally teacher. He always went on about how young and strong our spirits were, how anything was possible as long as they believed in themselves. He was crazy, but he wasn't a bad teacher. As far as Sasuke could tell, Guy was a sincere teacher. Like all teachers, Guy had a favorite student, his prodigy, he would say. Rock Lee was pretty much an exact copy of Guy. Oh yes, Sasuke remembered Guy. How could he forget? Even though both were extremely eccentric, they were just as kind and compassionate. They were hardworking, kind, understanding, and supportive to their loved ones. They were the sort of people where if their enemy was down, they would refuse to strike them when they were vulnerable. Even if it meant their death, which was exactly why Guy was gone. It seems surreal that Guy had been killed when he stopped a madman going on a rage for power. The man who had committed the felony had been also killed in the process. Guy was looked upon as a hero. Yeah, how does that have anything to do with your first question? Sasuke began to take out his cell phone to check for messages. Yet again, some crazy bunch of stalkers managed to find his cell phone number and spam him with requests and threats. He clenched his jaw tightly, teeth gritting against each other in silent displeasure. Ever since he was alone for the first while as a child, he had many supportive friends and girls who claimed they cared about him. During those times, he was happy, but that quickly dimmed into nothing, showing a clear path of what they really wanted from him. Sasuke, why are you acting defiant? I'm not trying to corner you. Naruto seemed to have sensed the built-up tension, or most likely, saw the expression Sasuke was showing. It's nothing, I just have a slight cramp. He lied effortlessly. No one actually seemed to care about Sasuke, they just seemed to be infatuated with his looks and excellent grades. Not one person could see the pain and loneliness he felt, all but Guy and Lee. They had approaching him about it, but back then, he was a bit of a prick. Still, the sincerity of their words were enough to give him some comfort, although he didn't show it. He sighed and pressed the off button on the side of his phone, slipping in his jacket's pocket, soon to be forgotten. Both of them often cried because they were happy. Or sad. How does crying have to do with their emotions? Then, when Guy died, Lee did not cry, he simply stared sadly at me and sighed. Why wasn't he crying? Naruto asked again, his voice tone uneven and confused. Sasuke would have signed at the question, it was such a difficult question to answer with words. Humans just naturally know these things, something like Naruto wouldn't understand. When humans are very happy or upsets, they can't express it through words and can only cry to show the physical emotion they feel. But when their emotions reach extremes in sadness, crying does not express how much agony they feel. Sasuke clenched his fingers tightly when a picture of his dead parents began to paint itself in his head. When they are extremely upset, they lose all energy to even react, let alone breath. That's why Lee can't react, he's too numb from the death of Guy. Is it because the thought of Guy's corpse rotting away into nothing? Is Lee afraid the fact that Guy is gone, the memories of Guy will also disappear? Naruto took a closer step to Sasuke, their faces on inches apart. Sasuke glanced away, turning his body to the side. For some reason he didn't want to answer. Sasuke, look at me, the blonde man demanded. Sasuke did turn to look at Naruto, but gave a glare to Naruto. What did Naruto want? Was he trying to get at something? I don't know. Humans are not as simple as observing one human. Sasuke felt the small bitter flame of anger grow stronger as his words came out. He should have stopped, but for some reason he refuses to bite his tongue. Everyone is different. Stop. They react different, they feel emotions which make them human. Sasuke, shut up before you make this worse. Sasuke smiled dryly at Naruto in cold disdain. Something like you wouldn't understand what it's like to be human. Sasuke spat, soon realizing the misplaced anger in his words were a mistake. His body threatened to compile and explode from panic. He wanted to take it back, but he couldn't. So he just stared at the dry ground, ebony bangs hanging in front. His apologies stubbornly clung to his tongue instead of exiting out of guilt. They clustered around the middle of his throat, which made it hard to swallow. It wouldn't have mattered. His mouth had suddenly become dry. To his relief the silence broke, but to his horror, it was words. You're right, I don't understand. Sasuke's heart dropped. Was it just Sasuke, or did those words sound cold? When a human exhausts their body and dies, their bodies are slowly rotting away from the carbon and nitrogen, soon to be nothing but of soil. While for me, there is no dying. Sasuke wanted to apologize. He did, but his pride got in the way, and he continued his heartless charade. Which is why you can't ever become a human. How did it turn like this? Why? Sasuke heard Naruto chuckle. His eyes dared to meet cold, blue ones. Naruto had a tight smile, a small, transparent gap had appeared between them. Which is why, it's not worth treating me like a human, right? You're not worth a thing. Sasuke stubbornly replied, his pride still refusing to budge. To let you know, it was a lie. It was the biggest lie he ever told to someone and himself. Ever since Naruto appeared, he was worth a lot to Sasuke. Naruto silently closed his eyes and nodded numbly, acknowledging and processing his words closely. I suppose to you especially, I'm just a metal machine with legs, aren't I? It wasn't a question, it was an accusation, one that Sasuke allowed to slip by and be condemned as the right answer when his actual thought of Naruto was the complete opposite. But he didn't love Naruto, why would he? At least it's good to know. Oh God, that voice sounded like calm anger and pain. Was Naruto actually angry? And what did he mean by, it's good to know? Soon his legs walked towards Sasuke, the once muddy blue, now an unforgiving topaz. Before I forget, your kiss. Naruto pressed his lips gently to Sasuke's. It felt like a punch in the stomach rather than a brush from a feather. Sasuke felt sick. He felt his head drown away in dizziness, his stomach flip, his body feeling light and unstable. I hope you have a good time making bonds with the ones who are worth your time. Naruto added. Then he left like a shadow, all alone and unwanted. Was it just Sasuke, or did it seem Naruto was heartbroken? Why is it everything Sasuke touched, it breaks? He couldn't even get along with a robot. Damn it, he was an Uchiha. Uchihas do not feel remorse over their actions and words. Uchihas do not act like this. But Sasuke wasn't an Uchiha. He was a liar, a coward, and a bastard. Not worth loving at all. The cool, coal eyes glared at Naruto. They spoke hate and unforgiving words. Though sounds did not escape his mouth, it was clear that hatred ran thick like molasses. Thicker than blood. I hate you. is what Sasuke wanted to say. You're unforgiving. He told himself. He knew very well no one could hate the reflection he saw of himself. Silent words for nothing. Why did those words he had said to Naruto cut deep inside himself? The burning anger of hatred quickly drained away as Sasuke began to walk home. The burning tears inside his fleshy heart was almost unbearable, but he had no right to complain. He was human, wasn't he? Saint was not a word that describes Sasuke. Actually, he was a heartless bastard that came from hell. It really was funny how he could become a cold, unfeeling being in a blink of an eye. Whereas Naruto could seem so human. Smiling especially. Dry laughter escaped his mouth as Sasuke walked quietly down the streets. His eyes dazed at the sandy pattern, while his thoughts drowned in regret. The sun that was tucked halfway from the horizon sang colorful shades of peach, violet, and watermelon in the clouds, shining the world in beautiful hues of dyes before the sun went to sleep. Humans were meant to being able to feel hatred and love. But Sasuke could only feel spite and bitterness. What else could he feel? It's not like anyone stayed long enough with him to push through the layers of angry skin. No one saw any worth in him. Sure, Sasuke didn't enjoy bashing puppets and kittens, but that never meant he would go out of his way for another person. Sweet and comforting words were not part of his personality. He did not understand why others would go out of their way to help others, but he didn't care to find out. He just wasn't the interested type. He wasn't interested in other people. But maybe that was a fault in his part. That's why he tried to bury everything inside, hide it somewhere he would never remember. He just wanted to forget Naruto, forget his cruelty, and to forget he existed. Why did he have to meet Naruto? Because of that. Sasuke's thoughts and pace stopped there. Silent confusion had planted its roots in him. Was this right? To feel confused over a robot? Sasuke never acknowledged anyone as their equals because he didn't trust them. Sasuke believed humans were dishonest, distrustful, and selfish. But maybe Sasuke was actually describing himself. All of this was too much. Sasuke didn't want to think about this anymore. He wanted to throw the burning feeling in his chest away. Emotions were seeping into him, and Sasuke was scared. Scared of allowing himself to bond to Naruto like this. These changes were arriving far too fast. Ever since his family had been murdered, Sasuke could never escape the empty world his mind lived in, but before he knew it, his body and mind noticed the bleak and falseness of Sasuke's outlook on life, and it was too late. By that moment he realized he was feeling affection again. Realization hit Sasuke across the face. The process burned in his skin. Dark eyes welled with heartache, spilling the liquid out of grief. He was alone. Alone back then, and alone now. Nothing has changed. He continued to walk, the last bit of the sun's life dying out, leaving the world to freeze itself. Wiping his face clean of emotion, the back of his hand lifted to brush the evidence of grief on his face. Eventually he shoved his fingers in his pocket in his pants, fishing out his house key when his feet had planted itself on the familiar rug. As he slid in the key and turned to unlock the front door, Sasuke was mindful to scrape the bottom of his shoe for grime on the rug. Itachi already had enough on his plate working all the time. They both could afford a mansion and servants, but they liked privacy. Especially Sasuke. When he entered the room of warm air, the clock struck 1 in the morning, the dark chime from the grandfather clock. Too emotionally tired to even wonder how he arrived home so late, Sasuke trudged quietly to his room. Dark blue was the majority color scheme of his bedroom, doing a poor improvement to Sasuke's mood. Tips of cold fingers grasped and clenched his arms as he hugged himself under his bed. The nestled warmth from the sheets did nothing to ease the cold in his skin, frost biting at the edges of his skin. Hiding and comforting himself like this almost never happened. Sasuke was never one to express his weaknesses, but he had difficulty putting a strong front when it came to sharp-sounding lightning. It reminded him that he was alone. When it thundered at school, he would simply keep a straight face, but has to keep his grip tight to somehow ground himself. Refusing to give in to the swelling of emotions. He hated this. Always being the strong one, and always the lone wolf. It's what Sasuke is. What he always will be. He wasn't worth very much. After all, what did he have? Not much, not enough to gain friends. Most outsiders' eyes would gaze upon Sasuke, silently envying the confidence and beauty Sasuke overflowed with. Reality told a different tale. He was lonely. It didn't help that he had the perfect backstory women swooned over. Sasuke started out in a good family, but this quickly turned bitter after a crazed slaughter, leaving Sasuke and his oldest brother Itachi by themselves. Tragedy had struck in his life and women treated it as if it was part of the package with Sasuke as the ultimate prize. What a joke. Men weren't much better. This was specifically why he hated the idea of dating. To fall in love, to suddenly become vulnerable, to even have friends, the very idea of becoming close to someone was terrifying to Sasuke. Even went as far as cutting most ties off with Itachi, so if Itachi disappeared, Sasuke would have been prepared for it. Despite his older brother's attempts to remain close, Sasuke was cold and cutting. But he wanted to return the bond, he just didn't know why he was allowing himself to be so selfishly stubborn. But his arrogant pride wouldn't allow him to admit such a thing. He was prideful, but he wasn't ignorant. He knew that this was bringing more damage to their broken family. He fucking ran away from Itachi, his only family left. Itachi cared for Sasuke and Sasuke repaid him by throwing it back in Itachi's face. Once again, the luminous drops of tears spilled away from Sasuke. By hiding away from the world's eyes, he could be free from everything. Why couldn't he be honest with how he felt? Everything Sasuke had ever done always came back to hurt him, hurting others and himself without meaning to. He couldn't do anything right, he wished he was never born. What purpose did he bring anyway? He wasn't smart like his brother, kind like his mother, or patient like his father. Pain was like a raw wound, bleeding misery like it was a river. Pain was everywhere in Sasuke. Sasuke knew that crying like this wouldn't do anything to help him. No one should pity him, because other people had it worse than him. Maybe it was unnecessary to think so much. Sasuke was a failure and only that. Why couldn't he take control of his life? Why was everything good have to be ruined by him? Why was it that everything he touched would hate him? Isolated. It would have been better if he was buried and forgotten. Resonating rings of the doorbell broke him out of his anguish, as if something or someone had felt his distress. Unsure what to feel or do, he sprinted for the door, throwing off the covers. The cold had somehow dissipated. Everything disappeared. It was the door and Sasuke left. He needed to reach the door. His fingers were sweaty and tingled when he gripped the doorknob and swung it open. Blonde locks were flattened by the heavy rain, pieces of them sticking onto tanned skin, drops of water leaving new trails on the guest. Marine eyes with drops of navy topaz gazed at Sasuke, holding no grudge regarding their earlier feud. Just calm eyes that refused to hate Sasuke. My house is locked. Do you mind if I stay overnight until Kakashi and Iruka arrived? I realized that Sasuke was upset. The tight fingers clenching in restrained fury, and narrowed eyes were the clear evidence. But when we parted ways, I asked Kakashi and Iruka if I could visit Sasuke. Naturally, Kakashi inquired if I had done something wrong. I told him no, but also said yes. Explaining the entire thing was complicated, I simply added that I wanted to fix things. Lips turned upward and he nodded, telling me to be back by tomorrow. Puzzled by his sudden compliant attitude, I only turned to walk to Sasuke's house. Although it would be incorrect to say this, Kakashi's eyes seemed oddly happy. If eyes could smile. I realized that I had a morality compass programmed into me, but I went against it, and there was no error. So did that mean lying is acceptable when you only have good intentions? Is that why parents lie to their children? For their own good? Why? Preserving innocence was one of the prime things parents wanted for their children, but by preserving such pure minds, wouldn't that only bring tragedy once their children are drowning in reality? I suppose I would find out one day. Maybe I too was like a child. Exactly 7:35 p.m., drops of rain had absorbed into my hair. I wasn't alarmed. I was created to remain waterproof for an hour and a half before any damage would begin. Rain is created by a cycle of evaporation and transpiration, but my thoughts began to wonder if Sasuke was crying. His eyes were so gloomy, and looked like he had been fighting something inside of him. I suppose living in an empty house, barren of any other life, didn't help his grief-stricken state. Before I knew it, my pace had increased and I was in front of his house. The windows were dark, and there seemed to be no sign of life. The house was overshadowed by dark clouds and neon lightning. Cautiously I stepped on the rug, and rang the doorbell. Faint thumps of what I inferred as running. The door swung open as if it was eagerly awaiting for my arrival. Widened, black pupils focused on me. Sasuke was still wearing the school's uniform shirt and pants, but something was off. Surrounding his eyes were strokes of swollen pink, his nose was slightly moist, and his hair was a little disheveled. Had he been crying? Without thinking once again, I stepped inside the house before he could close the door on me. My house is locked. Do you mind if I stay overnight until Kakashi and Iruka arrived? I asked, lying without a second though. Idly, I worried if I had a memory virus in my system. I've been impulsively acting out of my programming rules. Shakily, he nodded, remaining quiet as he locked the door and a cute click. The harsh trembling from his body was barely noticeable. Now that I was inside, I noticed the entirety of my body was soaked in the precipitation from the rain. To break silence, I turned my head to Sasuke. Do you have a towel I could wipe myself off? He was still standing in front of the door, his back towards me and rigid. I repeated myself, and it had seemed he was in a focused trance. You can take a bath. He told me, his voice sounding so devoid of any life. There wasn't even signs of anger from the earlier day. A hand took mine and pulled me forward down the hall. Normally I would have pulled away or asked what he was doing, but I didn't. The simple gesture of holding my hand reminded me of a lost child. Lost, scared, desperate. When a child is lost, they want someone to hold their hand to comfort them, so that they won't be alone, because every child's fear was to be alone in the world with no one who loved you. But then again, being alone didn't seem appealing to me. The smooth floor was reflective and clean, not a single speck of dirt. So clean, so alone, and so sad. Did Sasuke have no one? He didn't have any friends or family. Heavy pressure was in my chest. My following steps slowed, wiping out the rain from my eyes. The bathroom was clean, spotless, and resembled like a high-class hotel. Before Sasuke left me be, I turned to him to reach for his face. He flinched until he met my eyes. Apprehension was so clearly defined in his face until I swiped away a stray tear under his eye. Although there was no hard evidence that he had been crying, I told him, I'm sorry for earlier today. And, because I must have caused Sasuke to become such a wreck, our talk at school must have brought unpleasant memories. I knew about the murders. Kakashi told me about it before I left to go after Sasuke. So I knew that I needed to apologize. For that, I was sorry. I did nothing wrong since I didn't know, but it seemed that Sasuke needed comfort, but I wasn't sure if he needed it from me. His body did not move, his lip quivered before replying to me, his tone had sounded heavy and guilty. All I could offer was that I was in wrong. Naruto, I'm not sorry for what I said earlier today. I turned to him with raised eyebrows. I simply stared at him quizzically, urging for him to continue. His fingers fiddled at the end of his shirt. A nervous gesture. I realized that everything I said wasn't true. I don't think you're just a machine. I'm trying to say, you're a blind idiot. His words were harsh out of plain text, but his tone seemed happier, and his mouth was in a smirk. Playing along I asked, why am I an idiot, smiling just a little. Sasuke kissed my forehead and said nothing, settling himself in the shower. Figure it out yourself, you idiot. I sat in the separate bath, murmuring to myself, bastard. I called him, although I wasn't sure why I insulted him, it was unlike me. I turned the knobs of the cold and hot rates of water. The water was a comfortable 105 Fahrenheit. The sound of trickling hot water from Sasuke's shower was muffled in my ears. I grabbed some soap to clean the excess dirt caught on my skin. Sasuke, I called. A few seconds he replied. Naruto, generally when two males are naked, they don't talk to each other. I know. I lathered the soap around my arms and legs, scrubbing gently. I'm just wondering, why don't you live with Kakashi, Iruka, and me? I know you trust Kakashi, so what's stopping you? I asked, finishing up on soap and washing the soap off and began to apply the shampoo into my hair. It smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. I closed my eyes and some streams of foamy shampoo flowed down my face. Kakashi has Iruka, and you. His voice sounded so distant, as if he was chatting with a stranger. Unsure, I decided to test the waters regarding his brother. Don't you have any family members you could live with? The shower shut off. Silence was the dominant atmosphere once again. I'm sorry. I began. Forget about what I asked, it was inconsiderate. He doesn't need me. He's too busy. There was rustling and clinking of objects. I kept silent, allowing Sasuke the freedom to decide if he wanted to continue or finish the conversation the way it was. Our parents favored him. Always one to be perfect. My mom was nice, but it was really clear that they favored Itachi with the amount of attention they gave to him. To be honest, I hated him for that. I was overshadowed by him. The sound of a cap being popped open followed his sentence. A squirt of shampoo was being emptied in his hand from what I could tell. But despite my childish outbursts and tantrums, Itachi dealt with me, calming my anger and taught me to behave. To understand losing my temper wouldn't help myself or anyone else. His tone had become taut and his voice was breathy. The wobbly emotion in his words was a clear sign that he was struggling to get the words out. The water began to run again. So when our parents died, I was thrown away by Itachi. He took over our family's business and left for trips around the world. I was angry when he left me here. I went out of control. Night parties nearly every day. It wasn't so bad, I didn't take any drugs, but… Sasuke. I tried to make him stop. For some reason I began to panic. I felt flashes of tight electricity run up my arms and bundle in my chest. My hand followed and pressed where it hurt. Pain, was that what this was? Unexplainable falling, a sharp, raw sting that made me vulnerable to pain. Stop, you don't need to go. What sounded like a hand smacking against the water handle stopped at the same moment the water turned off. You don't understand. I was driving when I was drunk. To get home, I almost hit my brother. Sasuke's voice was shaky and I had no doubt he was in tears. All of a sudden it seems the room had the heat sucked out. It was so cold. He has a limp now. He didn't talk to me very much after he recovered. I nearly killed my brother, and now he can't bear to look at me. My brother was like my parents in a lot of ways. When I achieved something great, he'd be the one to praise me and mean it. Now, I was just the monster that tried to kill him. Living with him, I stopped going to the parties, but I began to. Pressure increased in my chest. I wasn't in danger from the water, and I was given a full body examination for any glitches or problems yesterday. Nothing should be wrong, but my battery level wavered a little, still at the 80% charge. Sasuke, don't do this to yourself. Don't force yourself. I don't want to make you feel this upset. A choked noise came out from him. You're the only one that hasn't left me. I want you to know. I shut my mouth and allowed him to finally finish the most difficult and emotional confession I've had the privilege to hear. He trusted me, and I already promised myself I would not tell anyone. For a few months, I'd see a knife, and there'd be so much blood and pain, but it was the only thing I could control and distract myself from my misery. I've stopped recently, but I get so desperate for some kind of numbing for my head. To stop the thoughts. But then I look at myself. I'm disgusting and deserve to die. Bitterness was found in his voice. He sounded sad and alone. Without a second thought, I stood up, the sound of water splashing and dripping down my thighs. I climbed out to pull open the door of Sasuke's shower. He was sitting and hugging his knees. His breathing was heavy and sniffles were the auditory clues that he was crying. I climbed in the shower with him and wrapped my arms around him. Resting on my knees I hushed him, and his fingers clung to my wet skin. As an android, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what would have been the right thing to say. Words of comfort could backfire. Doing nothing could make it seem that I disliked Sasuke. That wasn't the case. In fact, I think if I were human, I would have liked to say that I loved him. To love him. Love, you're not disgusting. His sobbing slowed a little. Even if it was a minimum change, I continued to soothe him. You're just human. Unlike me, you suffer and make mistakes. Perfection itself is an ugly vanity-obsessed word. While I was created in the image of someone else, you've made mistakes and you've regretted things. These are proof you're alive and that you will be able to live through this. When everyone I know dies, I'll still be walking. Alone and clueless to humans, soon to be forgotten. Everything you are is beautiful. I told him. His trembling body soon relaxed and had fallen asleep. I buried my face into his neck. And this time, water from the bath dripped to his neck, but I realized it wasn't bath water. They were my tears. The silence of the whole house seemed off. To Naruto it seemed to echo emptiness. No one was there except for Sasuke and him. It was lonely and dark. Even when both Iruka and Kakashi are absent in their house, though is still very lively despite the lack of attendance. Birds seemed to enjoy nestling close to Naruto's house. Pakun was always needy for attention by nudging Naruto. Sunlight would leak in. The soft laughter and screaming of reckless children would be audible from the open windows. Even at night the crickets would be lovingly sharing their tunes with the moon. To Naruto, Sasuke's house was a good reflection of silence and isolation. Naruto was used to lively noises, so the house he stepped into seemed so dull in comparison. So lonely. It made Naruto strangely uneasy being in such a gloomy atmosphere. It seemed almost familiar in a way. Occasionally Naruto would hear someone whisper, "Don't abandon me." Whenever Naruto found himself uncomfortable to how quiet and sullen the whole house was. When the soft crying ended in the showers, Naruto delicately dried off Sasuke with a towel, though he was extremely hesitant because he wasn't sure what a human usually does with a naked person. Needless to say, he wasn't used to taking care of humans and tucked the unconscious Sasuke to bed after clothing him, leaving Naruto to his thoughts as he took a chair to place it across from Sasuke. Naruto wondered if Itachi was actually bitter about the accident. To Naruto, he understood Sasuke's regret on a rational level, but surely he knows Itachi must be worried about him. They were each other's only family left. But what did Naruto know about family anyway? His eyebrows furrowed when he remembered, you can't ever become a human. That's true, Sasuke might have been angry at the time when he spat those burning words, but they were the truth. No matter what shape Naruto could take, clothes he wears, and mannerisms he displays, it's the cold hard truth he will always be a metal machine shaped and programmed to imitate humans. Those words were the first to ever succeed in causing such turmoil inside him. There was nothing of him that was human, his appearance was also artificial projection. Naruto was born from fire and metal. That just wasn't human. Even though he had gotten this far, gaining a human body was the impossible step. Then he began to trail to the fact that time would decompose a human body in what would seem like a lifetime to a mortal. To Naruto it would seem like a mere passing day. Images of Kakashi and Iruka dead mixed into his thought process. He stopped thinking about it immediately. Suddenly he didn't want to think about death anymore. But now he understood, if only a little, when Naruto spoke of Guy in such a blunt manner, it must have recalled unpleasant memories of Sasuke's parents. That was possibly why Sasuke had switched his attitude so quickly. He was upset. The newfound understanding of human nature fascinated Naruto. He found that humans were so complex because of their entanglement of one another. Emotions were the core of every word and action when it came from humans. Although Sasuke was distant and often appeared to be stone cold, the reality was that his heart was emotionally sensitive, which resulted in blocking others from getting close to his heart, pushing away any affection from outsiders. Such complexity was compelling to Naruto. But the fascination quickly turned to an unreachable dream. Naruto was created to mimic humans, but there was a fine line he could never cross. Becoming human was the impossible. Humans were made up of the same materials, but each a very different mammal in numerous ways, while a machine is the same as the next, nothing unique, nothing important. He was only artificial. You're not worth a thing. Am I really worth nothing? Naruto found himself asking, pondering the words of Sasuke. Naruto recalled that moment. His response was out of impulse, as if he was angry. The words had escaped his mouth before he could control the tone and emotion, expressing frustration, as if he was capable of such a thing. He purposely lashed back at Sasuke, but he didn't understand why or how he could have lashed at someone, to develop such a thing as a temper. Perhaps his programming was in need of a fix and an update, otherwise, all of it would mean that I didn't mean it. A tired voice mumbled, a shade more withdrawn than usual. Naruto turned his head to Sasuke, his eyes open, revealing evening black eyes with specks of regret in them. What I said earlier today. His eyes glancing to the side, away from Naruto, dark eyes contained shame. Naruto could only offer a thoughtful stare with silence as a reply. Sasuke never usually apologized, he was always so quiet and prideful, but this was new. A low rumble from the thunder interrupted the peace, as if the sky was growling in objection to this silence. The only time a prideful person would admit their fault is when they realized they might lose everything if they didn't become honest. From Naruto could tell, it seemed that Naruto was the only thing Sasuke had left. The way Sasuke reacted to the risk of Naruto leaving. The threat of losing him created a sense of desperation. Pain. Sasuke was frightened of pain, and that fear was what made him choose loneliness over the option of human company. Naruto's fingers became unsteady till he gripped the edge of his shirt to calm his hands. Somehow Naruto wanted to apologize. Not just for his words, but also for the hardships Sasuke must have gone through growing up. Someone needed to apologize. Somehow the idea of Sasuke suffering for all these years made Naruto experience discomfort in his chest like before, only it was tight and it was difficult to speak. I'm also sorry, Naruto finally said, beginning to take action in hopes of repairing any fresh damage in their relationship. No more pointless suffering, enough was enough. I said something that must have upset you. I realized this, and I wanted to apologize, said Naruto in a soft huff, blue eyes filled with anxiety when they glanced up to meet Sasuke's complex dark ones. To apologize, Sasuke repeated, thinking carefully to Naruto's words, wondering if Naruto comprehended that he had stated he wanted to do something out of desire and not out of logical information. Do machines have the capacity to desire? Or do humans simply lack the capability to accept something they don't understand? Naruto nodded in patience, waiting for Sasuke to give an answer. However, the neutral expression of Sasuke's face made it difficult to react appropriately for Naruto. Do something, anything, Naruto encouraged in his thoughts, wanting the tense air to loosen up. Sasuke's shoulders relaxed once Naruto nodded. His eyes was an abyss of conflict and slowly softened into a serene polished texture as he settled back to a calm mindset. He was baffled how the mere presence of Naruto lifted any negative motions inside him, filling it with a tingling burn in his chest and fingers that drew out bursts of emotions contrasted to being sent spiraling down a hole of heavy emotions. I was never mad at you, Sasuke replied, his roundabout way of accepting Naruto's sincere apology. Luckily Naruto didn't miss the tone of forgiveness in Sasuke's absence of sound created a stiff air, something was still off. Boldly, Naruto decided to ask Sasuke a personal question, in hopes of settling a stronger foundation of their friendship. What were your parents like? Naruto asked with blunt force, surprised at himself for his abruptness. Thinking back on it now, was kissing on the lips an action you participated with friends? If it wasn't, what would that make him and Sasuke? Friends? Close friends? Lovers? Platonic ones? Sasuke's eyes widened and switched to meet Naruto's face, his eyes darting around Naruto's face before he began to tense, his eyes freezing as he withdrew himself away from Naruto. He wasn't prepared to enter that area of personal information, nor would he ever be willing to share it. Thunder cackled above them, the ceiling rumbling in response. Lightning followed the sounds by flashing moments of bright light in the clouds, glowing for a brief second. Sasuke opened his mouth to reject the golden blonde's question until Naruto added, "Never mind. Don't force yourself to answer." The android was no idiot. Sasuke's jaw clenched, his eyes became hard, and his body language became cautious. Naruto had stepped on another sensitive area. Quickly he tried to ease the mood by adding reason to his earlier question, to prevent a possible argument to ensue. He never meant to be nosy. You see, humans require an adult figure to properly learn since humans can't make the correct decisions until their frontal lobes develop when they are 20. I simply want to hear what it's like to have two parents to learn from, too. Naruto hesitated before continuing, the blank stare of Sasuke's made him hesitate. Was this anxiety? Be human, he finished, his eyes staring deep into Sasuke's. It dawned on Sasuke that Naruto never meant to offend him, that Naruto was only trying to learn, always trying to better himself to prevent any future mistakes. So he swallowed any bitterness that rose to the tip of his tongue that was waiting to escape in the form of hurtful words. He brought back his hardened expression to give him a sense of control as he would answer Naruto's question. My mother was like any other mom. She was sweet, patient, and well-mannered. Sasuke softly explained, his voice mildly happy from the nostalgia. Rather pretty, she never raised her voice unless she was serious or severely angry. When I was little, I'd always cry when she scolded me, but I always knew she wanted the best for me. By now Sasuke felt the bitterness begin to claw up his stomach when he began to think of his father, but slowly faded into a slight ache in his chest. My father was a different story. He was harsh, cold-cut, and distant. His fingers clenched. His father was always strict and harsh, but he was a good father. Sasuke just wished he could have told him before he died. Only he did have his warm side that revealed itself once in a while, like on someone's birthday, a wedding, and when both me and my brother graduated into high school. A tight smile pulled its way to Sasuke's lips, though small, Naruto saw it as a sign of regret. Regret for never appreciating what he had until he lost it. His father loved him, But he was too naive and selfish to even recognize that. They were good parents. At the time I believed they always saw my brother first before me. But I've realized that they loved both of us. Although the dark feeling in his intestines stopped, he nearly shook from remembering the feeling when he was told that his parents were gone for good. It had been less than 5 minutes since he started, but his sentences made his body feel worn out like a withered plant. Even though he was resting in bed, it was likely the incident in the shower played a role in his fatigued state. Which he was thankful it was Naruto that settled him in bed. Naruto would never call Sasuke weak. Because he was a machine. Or was that just an excuse? Sasuke found himself forgetting that Naruto wasn't human. To Sasuke, the feeling he got being around the blonde was a sense of contentment and stability. He would always trust Naruto no matter the situation. Naruto decided that switching topics would be a good idea, acting out of what could have possibly been identified as remorse. What's it like to live as a human? He finally asked, not expecting a clear answer since it would have differed from who he asked, but somehow, Sasuke's opinion mattered. Sasuke only smirked, offering an arrogant expression as he clutched the thick blanket, still babbled to feel his nails dig into his palm. His eyes were scrunched in melancholy and bitterness. Painful, he answered, voice mildly unsure what else to describe a human's life. Naruto looked up to him, his glassy eyes seeming to glow with something unusual. That's a rather vague answer. Naruto deadpanned, voice laced with mild disappointment. Naruto knew it was better than nothing, but it seemed he was looking for a more philosophical answer. Straightening his back for a better look at Sasuke, he took note of Sasuke's seemingly better condition. As his eyes traced around Sasuke's pale skin, he met eyes with him, taking notice of the faint scarlet color in his cheeks. A fever? Wondered Naruto, already locating the local pharmacy in case he needed to take a trip there for medicine. I realize that, you idiot. Sasuke snapped, sitting up since met eyes with Naruto. Naruto's eyes were vibrant as polished sapphire in a nest of lively blue fire. It was overwhelming to stare into such open eyes. The clarity in them made Naruto's naivety obvious. Sasuke felt his head buzz with a tingle, his cheeks feeling a bit heated from a random burst of bashfulness, his heart accelerating like a ball being dropped. Faster and faster his heart drummed on. Sasuke anxious as to what would happen when the ball reaches the ground. It was unusual for Sasuke to suddenly feel so conscious of himself. Normally he didn't care. He should have cared even less since he wasn't with any human, but instead he felt self-conscious with how Naruto looked at him. But he couldn't look away. The clearness of his blue eyes was mesmerizing. Naruto, programmed to be observant to human behavior, noticed Sasuke's uncomfortable expression, and assumed that his presence caused this discomfort. It's been an emotional day for him. I'll leave it up to him if he wants to clarify. I'm being rude by staying any longer. Naruto concluded. Despite his programming, his data was written to accept straight answers. Naruto honestly didn't like the idea of pushing Sasuke. He was satisfied with the way things were. Sasuke finally broke away the visual connection, his expression suddenly blank, making it difficult for Naruto to read him. The brunette laid back down to shuffle deeper under his blanket so he could turn his back to Naruto, presumably going to bed. Taking as a cue that he should go home, Naruto walked hesitantly to the door, resisting the weight that seemed attached to his feet. He brushed it off as low power since it seemed his battery was damaged by the alarming depletion rate. Naruto could only walk forward in a silence, unsure what to say to announce his departure in a lighthearted way when the mood was heavy and gloomy. A hand reached for the cold metal knob, Naruto turning his head to Sasuke, mouth opening to say something, but paused instead. Maybe he should smile? Or maybe he should shut up and leave, or maybe Sasuke still wanted him here since it was still raining heavily. His fingers touched the icy copper knob before Sasuke called him. Naruto. The voice echoed, resembling a soft tone like a child's. Fearful almost, to the idea of being alone. The reluctant android turned to see Sasuke's back, only it was farther away to the side of the bed than it was initially. The open space was enough for another person. Staring at the broad back, Naruto asked, "Do you want me to join you?" He knew his question was a risky one to ask since Sasuke was sensitive when it came to his pride. He understood that their relationship was still a bit fragile and unbalanced, that impulsive assumptions could lead to disaster, but he couldn't stop himself from asking immediately, as if he wanted to stay. There wasn't any answer, but Naruto knew Sasuke wasn't asleep. Reviewing the evidence that proved Sasuke was no longer angry with him, Naruto slid in the bed slowly, expecting for Sasuke to reject him when he settled his weight on the bed, but was surprised to hear no protest from Sasuke, taking it as a good sign. Perhaps he did fall asleep. Naruto wondered, later throwing out that assumption since Sasuke mumbled under his breath, "Idiot, get in already." The mumble was soft as a breath. No human could ever hear him, but Naruto's heightened senses easily caught his sentence. Sasuke must have realized his mistake and tensed. Feeling he was hovering above the danger zone, Naruto settled to withdraw and just leave. Sometimes humans are obscured to realize what they really need. In this case, Sasuke deserved some time by himself. The shuffling of the sheets alarmed Sasuke with irrational fear of being alone. If Naruto left, Sasuke would be alone. He wouldn't be able to handle it. He needed Naruto with him. Naruto reached to pull the blanket off so he could quietly exit the house. The moment Sasuke felt the movements of Naruto's departure, he impulsively grabbed him. His thoughts still muddled. Sasuke still felt so raw and violated from his breakdown. He didn't want to be alone. Everything was cracked and crumbling. He had enough of the emptiness that ate away his life. Time and time again, Sasuke was fine allowing people, words, and emotions to slip by him, fading to nothing. But this time, his pride crumbled, finally allowing his arms to reach out to prevent this one thing from disappearing from his life. No more. Sasuke's arms tightened around Naruto, pressing closer to inhale scent of Naruto's body, feeling comfort from the artificial being that offered him sincereness he was denied for years since he lost his home. "I love you," he realized, understanding his reason for clinging to Naruto, the need to keep the blonde by his side. Conceiving the pain, the impulsive actions, and his wavering demeanor. Naruto was the first to ever touch his heart, and care for it, as if he was a precious egg, to be nurtured and cared for. Love. This was love. Sasuke loved Naruto, and Naruto must have loved him, even if he wasn't aware of it, and it didn't matter if this was romantic or platonic. Sasuke loved Naruto. Sasuke could only view this as a tragic thing. To love someone meant grief in the future. He knew too well that Naruto would at some point leave him. But this fact didn't stop him from hanging on to Naruto. "Don't leave me, please. I'm sorry." Naruto's process blanked out for a bit. The warmth from Sasuke's body was overwhelming. He could almost say it was tempting to embrace Sasuke back, but he understood it'd be inappropriate to do so. His hands paused right before they touched Sasuke's back. He almost hugged him without even realizing it. He wasn't human. "I don't have a right to return the affection. I'm not made of carbon or oxygen." It would be too cruel to hug him. It'd be a lie. Slowly he closed his eyes, allowing Sasuke to press against him until his heart calmed down, savoring the moment of affection, but chose to ignore the screaming remorse he felt stir inside him. He couldn't and wouldn't allow himself to get closer. "Sasuke," he whispered, almost afraid of shattering the moment, but had decided enough was enough. The time for him to leave was now. He needed to put some distance between them. Sasuke was emotionally weak, and that was the only reason why the ebony-haired man desired him to stay. It nearly broke Naruto's heart to turn away from Sasuke now, if only he had one. Silence. But there was a response in Sasuke's breathing, quickening by half a second. Although it wasn't much, it encouraged Naruto to treat it as if he gave an audible answer, making sure to clear when he spoke to suggest his compromise since Sasuke seemed determined to keep Naruto from exiting. "Wouldn't it be better if I slept somewhere else? Or leave?" the android suggested, his voice gentle and diffidently reserved, giving a soft expression to calm the raven. No response, though Sasuke's eyebrow moved 0.2 millimeters by twitching. Instead of getting discouraged, Naruto continued. "I've caused you to become hysterical. I should not remain with you any longer for tonight. Your body is exhausted and requires sleep in order to recover." Naruto reasoned, feeling something unpleasant stir in his stomach to the idea of leaving Sasuke. It made him restless. Never mind the urge to console Sasuke. Naruto just couldn't be gentle anymore. But Sasuke didn't say anything. Not a word. The silence was unnerving, pushing Naruto to add another comment, "Besides." Naruto hesitated before continuing. "I'm a cold machine, I'm not soft or warm." "No," Sasuke replied, a little muffled as he pressed closer into Naruto. "You're warm enough for me." Opening his mouth to object, Naruto couldn't deny Sasuke anymore. His hand rested on Sasuke's head to stroke through the soft, rich locks of ink-colored hair. Both never moved from the bed, and neither spoke another word that night. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.